Gentlemen, again, happy to see everybody here for another episode of the Blind Pig, courtesy of BGObsession.com. As we sulk and share in our pain together. Before we kick things off, quick intros. Top left is Mark on the board. You can catch him as Ohm. Bottom left is John. He is Boone. Bottom right is Bob. He is Neophyte. And my name's Derek. You can find me at Silent Threat. So if you ever want to reference those four guys on the podcast, that's the easiest way to do it. Join up, bgobsession.com. We're more than happy to have you. So, fellas,
was there a game this week?
I don't know. There was just a lot of moving parts, but actually, I did want to. We can talk about the game, or we can not talk about the game. I think we're past the point. I was thinking a lot about this leading up to this week, or leading up to this podcast over the last couple of days, because last week it was a pretty negative podcast after a win. And I think the overall consensus thought from the three of us that were on last week was, now what? Well, now we got what? And I think we were, this was our concern, was that it was kind of hollow. There were a lot of holes to poke, and we followed it up with a less than stellar performance against another mediocre team where we could have been making some hay. So I don't know that we need to reflect. I think because I think a lot of the conversation we can have going forward will have a little bit of a reflection of the Giants game. But I mean, I guess we'll open the floor, and what do you guys want to say about it, and then we can dig into some other topics.
Well, I guess the one thing I would say is, I just keep harkening back to our expectations for this season, and we've got so excited about Snyder being gone and about Bieniemy coming in, and I think we may have I think Bob said it a couple of times before, we sold ourselves a bill of goods a little bit on what this season was going to be, especially with a young quarterback. And I know I sound like Ron Rivera, I really do. But I guess the one thing I wanted to say is I feel like we've torched Jack Del Rio all year long, and to a large extent, probably pretty fairly. We've definitely gutted Ron Rivera for reasons we all understand. I feel like Eric Bieniemy's gotten mostly a pass up till now, but I don't think you can give him a pass for this game. I'm not gonna spend 10 minutes on it, but I don't understand, and I'm just a fan. We always give that caveat, right? But I don't understand how you're on pace to setting the exploding the NFL sack record. Setting a record that may never be broken again if we keep on the way we're doing. And you're not changing up things. You're not rolling him out. You're not, you're continuing to drop him back in 7-step drops. I don't understand that. I felt like the game plan and how long it took us to do anything at all differently in that game, I don't think it reflected very well on Bieniemy. So that's, and again, I like a lot of things about Bieniemy. I like Bieniemy a lot more than I ever expected to like Bieniemy, just the way he carries himself and his positivity. And I'm sure this week he's going to talk about how it's a growth process, and we got a young quarterback, and we're working on all these things. But I just don't think we should have gotten dominated at the line that way. And I think the play calling and the seeming stubbornness to get away from what the game plan was when it was clear that it wasn't going to work, that was kind of perplexing to me.
Yeah, that was one of my top notes too, John, that it's kind of, at least the way I'm feeling about it right now, the bloom's a little bit off the rose with EB. And that was the one part of the team this year I was really thinking might be different. It's really kind of stunning to me that the offense does not seem to have really progressed much. If anything, it's almost regressed in some areas. The Giants spent pretty much the entirety of that game of our, 14 possessions that the Commanders had, just loading up the box and throwing people at us from every direction, and we had no answers. So your offensive coordinator is supposed to be the one who comes up with the answers. And if Wink Martindale and EB were the matchup, I mean, they would have stopped that fight early. It was a complete mismatch, as far as I could tell. So That's a problem. And I don't know where we go from there. I don't know how that changes the dynamic going forward into the rest of the season and into next year. I'm hopeful that if EB really plans to be around here, either as OC or head coach next year, there's some major steps he's going to have to take there. My other just general take from the game, and then I'm not going to go off on it. I'm sure we'll cover all the other parts too, but it's I was going to start my thing by playing like in Groundhog Day, Sonny and Cher, I Got You, Babe. That was what I was going to play as a sound effect, but apparently we couldn't arrange the technology. The first half of every game, our team's just really not ready to go, and they spend the first half getting their legs under them. The defense eventually figured it out again, like they usually do, and played respectably down the stretch. But they were pretty awful and unprepared looking to begin the game. And the offense never really did get it going until the very, very end, when it was just, haphazard and here we go, and maybe we'll eke another one out. So the preparation thing every week, week in and week out, just tells me that this coaching team, the coaching regime that we've got now, doesn't have what it takes to get this particular group of players going. I don't think we're getting the max out of what we got. And I don't think we're going to see a big change in that the rest of the year. I wish I felt differently, but that's where I am right now.
I kind of want to pick up right there, Mark. You set me up without meaning to, and I wasn't quite thinking this when you started, but by the end of it, I am. I'm at this point, I'm actually kind of happy we didn't eke the game out, and the reason is because oftentimes a W papers over the cracks in the wall, right? I mean, you put a W up, and I mean, we constantly talk about how nobody will remember it was a 1 or a 2 point win 3 years from now. You're absolutely right. Nobody will. And we probably would have forgotten about this game, by the off season to a very large degree if we'd managed to pull it off. We won't forget about it now. The Giants are not a good football team. They just are not a good football team. And so what I took out of this is that we are not a good football team. And I know a lot of people are going to say, hey, man, but the defense only gave up 14 points. You're right. We only gave up 14 points. We gave up 14 points to largely a second string offense. Had that been any offense in the NFL other than the New York Giants, we'd have given up 28 minimum. If that had been the Dolphins, we'd have given up 78. The Dolphins would still be scoring right now. And I hate that whole, hey, we only gave up 14 points. Yeah, we only gave up 14 points, but we gave up 14 points to the Peoria Junior High JV team. And I'm a little worn out with it. I can't write it. I made up my mind earlier today. I was going to look for good things. And there were actually a couple of good things. I think I saw. My question at this point is what are we doing to stop the insanity? And by insanity, I mean doing the same thing every week, expecting a different result. And that's what we're doing. I'm watching the coaches trot out the same starting lineups. I'm watching the coaches do the same kind of game planning. I'm listening to the same thing in press conferences. Hey, everybody's just got to pull together. We got to work hard. We got bullshit.
We're close. I keep hearing that.
Yeah, we're not close. We're not close right now. I'm sorry. And it's I want to know what we're going to do to stop the insanity. And I question what the coaches are seeing. Again, as John already said it, we're just fans. But last week, Lucas showed me a whole lot more than Wiley's shown me all season long. This week, Charles went out injured. Stromberg came in, and the line seemed to play better. Maybe it's just me as a fan, and I don't know what I'm looking at, but things seemed to settle down, and there was less pressure straight up the middle. So I'm questioning, why are we not making some personnel changes? Why aren't we trying? I hear a lot of people, I read a lot of people going, man, it's time to bring Brissett in. I don't think Brissett's going to make a difference. I don't think Brissett is going to be any better than Sam Howell is at this point in time, because the pieces around him aren't going to change unless we do something drastic. But it's just kind of where I am at the moment, is how do we get off the carousel?
I don't think it happens under the current regime, to be honest with you, which is what I did want to touch on. So as I was coming into this week, I said I was thinking a lot about it, and I'm starting to kind of rationalize with myself that I've got to treat this like a pitcher who throws one at 96 at the eyes, would just change the eye level a little bit. There were doubts coming into the season. I think we all understood that. It's still Jack Del Rio. It's still Ron Rivera. It's largely still the roster. The hope was Bieniemy could change the offense. But at the end of the day, the biggest, and I've heard this on the local radio station multiple times, the biggest acquisition this entire offseason via the draft or free agency is a guy that we brought in to return kicks. I mean, Jamison Crowder has had more impact than anybody else we've brought in this season, including draft picks.
Oh, I don't know. Emmanuel Forbes had a pretty big impact for a couple of games.
For a couple games, sure, but
and I don't mean in a good way.
Wrong impact.
Right. So if I really take a look at it, realistically speaking, I mean, what did we expect? Obviously, this was the stretch we were supposed to win, but for the 4 years under Rivera and for the 25 years before that, this is the stretch that we stumble on. It's the same old Redskins. It's the same old Commanders. Now, obviously, it is different in a couple different aspects of it, but just because Josh Harris now owns the team doesn't mean that the frustrations that we've dealt with in years past are just going to go away. So I think a lot of that is where I'm resetting my mentality back into the big picture and thinking more and more about what's to come beyond 2023, because I don't see it. There's no way we make a playoff run, in my opinion. I don't think this team's good enough to have 2023 to be the priority anymore. So, yeah, exactly. I think to your point, Bob, about Jacoby Brissett, in the midway through the third quarter or the fourth quarter or the beginning of the fourth quarter, I might have parked Sam just to let him get a different point of view and not bench him in the sense that he loses his job. But Jesus Christ, just let him take a break from getting his head bashed in for a couple hours, Let another set of eyes get out there on the field, take the snaps, be able to report back in the meeting room. What were you seeing? Try to control the protections, help it out. Big picture, my biggest question with Eric Bieniemy is, why are we asking Sam Howell to be the biggest contributor to controlling the protections? From what I'm hearing, he has the most influence over the protection packages. He calls out the protection. So you want this guy to learn second offense in as many seasons, in his first full season starting, and not only does he have to control the offense, he's also going to manage the protections. What happened to the center managing the protection? And the quarterback and the center being on the same page. So that's a question I have. And the lack of investment and, like you said, ingenuity along the offensive line. There are options on this team that might not be top 10. They don't even have to be top 20. But Jesus, get from, we're talking about one of the worst lines in the history of the league. And yes, Sam has responsibility in it, but he's also not developed enough to expect him to be able to take these situations yet. Why do we expect him to be 8 games into the season and be able to be a perfectly polished quarterback that can run the offense and audible and change and do all of these things? I wonder if Bieniemy still is holding on to Patrick Mahomes, and he's going to have to remind himself that Pat Mahomes isn't back there.
I guess my thing is, I've heard a lot of and again, in theory, it sounds like a reasonable approach that they're leaving Hal in there to learn, he's kind of getting the crash course of being a starting NFL quarterback. But the problem is, in my mind, it's like, how much are you learning from your ass sitting on the turf?
Right. And that was
I don't know what you
maybe
learned from that, other than I don't want to get sacked.
Maybe spend a quarter watching from the sidelines and get a different perspective. It can change things.
I've heard a lot of people talking about he's going to get hurt. He's never going to survive this season. I think Sam Howell's a tough little SOB, and I think he will survive the season just fine. while setting the sack record. But what I worry about is I worry that he's going to be so shell shocked that he doesn't develop I think it's really hard to learn how to do all the things you have to do as an NFL quarterback when you are running for your life on most passing plays. And we've seen that before. We saw, I know everyone's brought up David Carr 1,000 times in the last 4 or 5 weeks, but I mean, it's concerning, it's concerning that is he going to be able to develop if he doesn't get any protection at all? And I also want to point out one thing that we don't talk about a lot since Canadian Hog could not be with us tonight, but we let a really good offensive line coach go. And I don't know whether he stormed out, John Matsko I'm talking about. I don't know whether he stormed out or he and Bieniemy just agreed that it wasn't going to work or whatever. But I'm telling you right now, that's looking like a really stupid way to go right now to me. And maybe it wouldn't make any difference at all, but.
Well, yes, agreed. I want to talk about Sam just for a second. And I went back and watched this thing 3 times now, the condensed version, because
I feel for you, buddy.
Well, I wanted to watch a couple of things. Particularly, I wanted to see if my first impression from Sam in this game held up, and it does. And I want you guys to tell me if I'm full of shit or not. This was the first time I have seen Sam Howell look tentative on his throws since he's been in a Commander's uniform. He was a little late on some throws. He was high on some throws. He did not have the usual zip on his ball on a lot of throws. The first interception directly attributable to that. He tried to lob it into a spot, and I haven't seen him throw a ball like that all year. The guy's open behind him. He just throws an ill-advised underthrown pass. It gets picked. That happens. But there were probably a dozen throws in that game that did not look like Sam Howell. There were still a bunch that did, but this is the first time I had seen that, and it troubled me. And he had sort of a rookie panic throw late in the game, the one that should have been a pick 6 to Thibodeau down out of our own end zone. I don't know if he was trying to throw it away or whatnot, but it looked like a rookie panic throw. And I haven't seen that from Sam since the Dallas game last year when he threw that one into the end zone that wasn't a panic throw. It was just a rookie mistake throw. So, and the reason I'm saying all that now is to John's point about he's getting his brains beat in. There is no way a human being is not going to have negative effects from the minute he takes the snap. He can't even get into his 3-set drop without somebody pressing him. So his eyes immediately have to be down to see if he's going to bail. He doesn't have time to go through progressions. He's not having time to learn the position. We went into this season with one thing we all agreed was the biggest thing this year is, does Sam Howell have what it takes to be the quarterback beyond this year? I'm not sure we're going to get a fair read on that unless something drastic happens with this offense over the next 10 weeks.
Yeah. To back that up, I am seeing some of that, Mark. I had that thought in the third quarter at some point in time that this didn't look like the same Sam Howell. And part of that, I think, is the pressure that he's getting and the number of times he's getting hit. I mean, he can't. You're absolutely right. It starts to creep in. I don't care how mentally strong you are, how tough you are. Sooner or later, you start worrying about stuff like that, if for no other reason than because it's impacting the way you do your job. I mean, he hears about the sacks every week in every press conference. So he's thinking about it. He goes into every game thinking, I've got to take fewer sacks or no sacks. Well, that's pressure in and of itself right there. Even before the defense lines up on the other side of the ball, he's putting it on himself, whether he means to or not. One of the things that jumped out at me, I was playing John's role this week. I was watching Twitter during the game. And at one point in time, and I forget exactly where it was. It was like late in the second quarter, early in the third quarter. Nikki Javala posted or tweeted out the average time to throw or sack on dropbacks for Sam Howell in the game, 2.23 seconds. There were plays where guys in blue uniforms were getting to the top of Sam's drop as fast as Sam was getting to the top of his drop, and that's not his fault. 2.23 seconds is beyond respectable. Pat Mahomes averages over 2.5 seconds to get rid of the football. So 2.23 seconds to get rid of the throw. So Mark, what I'm getting out of marry her statistic with your statement, and what I'm getting is Sam's hurrying things just a little bit because he's trying to not take the sack. But the flip side of that is, how do you not take a sack when the defense is getting there in 2.23 seconds? I just don't understand. I don't understand. I would like to go further with that statement, but I'll stop there because that's really the beginning and the end of it. I don't understand how 7 games into the season, I am still seeing the same breakdowns that I saw early in the season that caused Sam problems in game 1 and game 2. I don't. Why are we not making changes?
And it's getting worse every week, right? Because
Yeah.
there's enough film out there now. You think it was bad against New York? Philadelphia is going to just swarm the line of scrimmage on Sunday and dare us to do something about it.
Yeah. They not only does Philadelphia have tape on us, Philadelphia's got 60 minutes of football against us. And if I'm the Philadelphia defensive coordinator, the last thing I want is for Sam to get warm, because I've seen what happens when he gets. I don't want him hot.
So this is why I'm proposing a radical, earth-shattering draft concept, the all O-line 2024 draft.
I believe we talked about that on like the 17th fairway.
No other position gets drafted but O-line.
All OL, baby.
I don't know about no other position, but I would be fine with the first 3 or 4 rounds being all offensive line.
Yeah, I would too. Or maybe sneak a linebacker in there if there's a good one on the board.
We can do that in 2025.
But we don't actually need linebackers. Am I the only one, since we're getting into this now on Sunday, watching David Mayo chase after Waller, the tight end from New York? And I'm thinking we are essentially starting. I know Mayo was in for Barton, who was hurt, but first we had Barton trailing behind Waller, which is
on the touchdown. Barton was right behind,
which is a total mismatch. And then you've got literally David Mayo one-on-one against a really good pass catching linebacker. That's an indictment of. I mean, I'm sorry. I know Jack likes his 4-2-5 or whatever the hell it is he runs. I can't figure it out anymore, but. A couple of really good coverage linebackers and guys who can make plays and hit people would sure help out this defense, but we don't do that.
Yep. Yeah.
Kind of a decent transition then, I guess. I do want to pick your brain. One of the big local topics now, right, are the debate on whether or not Eric Bieniemy has shown anywhere near enough to be deemed a head coach, and we can have that conversation later. But the other one is the trade deadline. Reports are that I've seen multiple reports that teams have reached out about Chase Young and Montez Sweat. One report stating that multiple teams reached out with the intention of a long-term deal. I saw a report from Nikki Javala come out earlier this afternoon that there has been an offer submitted for Montez Sweat. Now, none of the details of that offer have been, released or anything, but what do you guys do? And I do want to point out, Chris on the board posted a little blurb. Apparently, the CBA back in 2020 wrote in that a player whose 5th-year option is not picked up will not qualify for compensatory pick return because you have not then satisfied the extent of a possible contract. So that means that Chase Young walking would not qualify for a compensatory pick.
Well, and we also have new ownership group and presumably new front office, and they're gonna go after free agents, right?
So they're gonna probably cancel out stuff.
Right. I can't imagine we're gonna get compensatory picks no matter what happens. I just feel like they're gonna try to bring in infused talent that first season, and that's just my guess. So I think that's a factor as well.
It is a factor. Derek, I think my biggest take on this is, and this is, we've talked about this before on this podcast numerous times. I don't want the current front office and football brain trust making those decisions for this team. What I would like to know is whether or not, now I'm assuming that this is happening, that Josh Harris and company are talking to professional football people to try to get an idea about who they're going to bring in and how they're going to do this. If they've got somebody who's competent to advise on moves like Sweat and Chase and all the various other free agents we have, right? We got Gibson, we've got Cam Curl.
Curtis
There's some big
Samuel,
decisions to be made on this team.
Kendall Fuller.
But going into the next regime, I don't want this brain trust saddling the next regime with good decisions, with bad decisions. So I'm really wrestling with it. I don't have an answer, but I'm equally as concerned that we do nothing and we end up letting all these guys walk than I am with we do something and it turns out to be just a complete fuck over to the team and handcuffs whoever's coming in next.
Don't you guys feel like if we do make a move that it almost implies that like the Harris group got involved somehow? Because I can't imagine Ron Rivera making a bold move if his ass was on fire. I just don't see it. We haven't seen it the entire. I mean, his bold move was signing Carson Wentz, right? That was his bold move. I just don't think he's shown no inclination when asked about it that there's any plans to look at making moves. So I almost feel like if one of those guys gets traded, they either have somebody pegged as like a GM to be, or the Harris group and Magic Johnson and all the rest of those guys have kind of sat down and said, you know what, we don't want to interfere with the football stuff, but this is kind of a unique circumstance because Ron's not going to be here going forward, and we need to direct him what we think the best thing to do is.
Would you be okay with it?
I would be okay with it because I think it's a no-brainer. You can't pay both those guys. You have to. You're probably not going to get anything for them if you do nothing. So do something. Something's better than nothing, right? I mean.
So I saw that number 18 million a year, sort of like as a baseline for those defensive ends. I don't know if that's conservative or not, but I've spent a little time today thinking, would either of those players forget the compensation thing if they walk away? I'm just saying, is either one of those guys a $20 million a year player, defensive end? You tell me.
So here's where I struggle with. I look at, and I started a thread about the next defensive coordinator in Washington a couple of days ago on the board because I'm really curious. I look at the players we have on this defense, and I can't help but think that we should be getting more. And it's not because these guys can't perform or aren't performing. I'm relatively convinced it's because of what we're doing and how we're going about doing it, what they're being asked to do. And what they're being asked to do doesn't put them in a position to make game-changing plays the way a lot of other defensive coordinators put their players in a position to perform. And so I probably speak for a lot of fans. My biggest fear is that we ship one of these guys out because we think they're a bum, and the next defensive coordinator turns them into the reincarnation of Reggie White, which is what we all thought we were getting with Chase Young, right? I mean, we all, I heard a lot of comparisons, with Reggie White when Chase Young came out of Ohio State. In his first season, he made a lot of game-changing plays. And I think the worst nightmare is that we trade one of these guys away and they turn all world on us. I mean, this is not to say that Preston Smith turned all world, but we let him walk, and he did some amazing things in Green Bay for the next 2 or 3 seasons. Green Bay used him correctly where we were not using him correctly. And he was close to the leaders in sacks in the NFL for at least 1, maybe 2 seasons there, and still an impact player 3-4 seasons into his contract for the Packers. I don't want to see that with Chase Young. I don't want to see that with Montez Sweat. I would almost rather risk letting them walk for nothing in the offseason but giving a new regime the opportunity to sit down and talk to them and say, look, we want to use you the way you should be used. We want to use you differently. Buy into the vision, sign a contract, let's play some football. And if they walk, they walk. But I'm kind of the mindset, I don't think, all right, if somebody were to walk in and say, I'll give you a first round draft pick for Montez Sweat today, I might have to take that deal. But am I going to do it for a fourth round pick? I don't think so.
Yeah, I guess my big question is why have we gotten to this point and we still don't know what we're going to do? It it just blows my mind. Why haven't we already figured out which one of those guys is the guy we want long term and made it happen?
Maybe the team has figured it out. They wouldn't necessarily have told us, right? I mean, they might have Marty.
Well, we'd know because they'd have signed. They'd have a new deal in place. Is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think we'd know, Mark. I think if it were Sweat would have been signed to a long-term deal this offseason. And I think if it were Chase Young, they'd have picked up his fifth-year option. I don't think they know.
I don't think they do.
Now we're in a lousy position where we've got two potential. I hate that word again, but we've got two potential brilliant talents, both hitting free agency in the same offseason, and no way to guarantee we can hang on to both of them if we really want to do that.
Are you suggesting that our front office has mismanaged this roster a little bit? The hell you say?
Never.
The hell you say?
A little bit.
So let's not. We can't lose sight of the fact that this entire season, and the fact that Ron Rivera is here and the Martys are here and Del Rio is here making the decisions for this team and making the game plans, is because the sale happened too late in the season to get a new team in here. This was a dead season walking for this team going in. We knew that. I think we're seeing it's almost to me like an inevitable result of that. And some of the collateral damage to all that is going to be how we handle all these free agents. I'm as concerned with Cam and Gibson and having them walk out of here and just losing them, because those guys can play. And if I will maintain, some people roll their eyes and then I'll shut up. But when we have less than the sum of our parts on that defense, I don't know how good this defensive roster is, because I don't think they're being deployed in a way that maximizes their talents. There's no synergy there. They don't play fast. They don't play together. Except, in bursts they do, but overall they just don't. And I put that squarely on the coaching, and that's not changing until next year.
This defense does a great job on first and second down of putting opponents in holes and then figuring out how to give up 15 and 20 yards on third and long. I mean, and it happens week in and week out. And Mark, there's synergy for bursts. You're absolutely right. It drives me up the wall. I thought you were fixing to say my next thought, and I thought you were going to go here, and then you veered. I think we all expected this season to be collateral damage from the sale of the team. My fear at this point in time is that next season, to some degree, is going to be within the blast radius.
Yeah, I agree, because with some of the roster issues are going to be with this team for a while now.
I mean, here's my problem with ownership. To go back a thought, here's my problem with ownership getting involved at the trade deadline at this point. The only legitimate way for them to get involved at the trade deadline is to sit down with Ron and say, look, we don't want you making any of these decisions because you're not the guy that's going to be making them in January. Once the words come out, once you tell the man that, then look at where we are now. Presumably Ron doesn't know his fate. Presumably Ron is coaching for his job.
I think he knows.
Well, he may know, but there's a difference between knowing and being told, John.
I think he's been told. I think he knows and he's been told. That's just my personal opinion.
Presuming he hasn't been told, and look at the way he's coaching now. How much worse does it get if he gets told in the next few days, hours, whatever? Hey, look, you're not making any of these trade decisions because you're not going to be here. And then what happens? Because it's difficult to hide that.
It could be horrible. We might lose some games.
Yeah. Well,
Sorry, the snark is strong in me tonight.
but it was funny. I've watched executives in the business world who knew they were leaving and couldn't tell anybody they were leaving, but everybody could see it. The job performance changes. The demeanor changes. You can't help it. It is human nature. And I'm a little worried about that, to be honest with you. No, we're not going to make the playoffs, but I don't want to finish the season 3-14 either.
We might do that now.
I know, but well, there's also every possibility we come out and beat Philadelphia this weekend. I don't know that I'm picking them in the pick 'em pool, but I'm just saying.
Bob, I think you're right. And I think the reason we're seeing what we're seeing is because they know. I think that's a part of it.
I think the team knows too, right? The players know.
Play it right. I mean, yeah, and you know that too. Once you know this guy's not my permanent job, and I mean, I'm sure that I get tired of hearing Ron talk in the press conferences. I can't imagine I know they say the right things when they're asked about this, but I can't imagine they're not tired of hearing all the Rivera isms week after week.
My guess is it's become almost as bad for them as being asked about the former owner. They've traded one lousy joke for another in press conferences, right? We're going to ask you about the off-field issues. Now we're going to ask you about the coach. How do you feel about your coach?
Well, I think John Allen accidentally said how he felt.
Oh, he didn't. There was no accident about that.
I think that I really felt like when I heard that the first time, I'm like, he's talking about the coaching staff.
You know what I think? I think he's fucking tired of this shit. Fucking tired of this bullshit. It's been 7 fucking years of the same shit. I'm tired of this shit. That's what I think he wanted to say.
Hey, at least he's getting paid. That was my comment to Mark. Imagine how it would feel if
I want to thank Jonathan Allen for saying what we have all been thinking for not just however 7 years. We've been thinking this for 20x years. Thank you, John, for saying what we were all thinking. And I hope he says it right to the coaches' faces too.
And speaking, John, your next truly is on us, because did you guys hear his post game? When he comes home, he has one adult beverage.
Yeah,
it's a Truly seltzer. He sits in the hot tub with his wife and bitches about the game over a Truly. So, John, your next Truly seltzer, I got you covered, man. It's on me.
So to that point,
we got a game. We got a game Sunday.
Hey, can I do a quick? I want one quick shout out in this game because I watched on the third rewatch. I understood that Stromberg was in the game, and that sumbitch threw 2 or 3 pancake blocks in the middle of that last long drive. If he's not starting on Sunday, I'm going to be incensed. Thank you very much, because he was killing it.
I thought Stromberg played well. I thought the line kind of solidified when he came in. I also thought Khalid Hudson had a pretty good game for the most part. He played a bunch of snaps on defense, and I thought he had a pretty good game.
Plays his ass off.
And yet again, Jamison Crowder had oh my gosh, the dude's eternal.
How about this team, right? The only reason we're not tying that game late is because a guy's middle 2 fingertips graze Terry McLaurin's helmet as he's going by. When Terry catches it, gets up and goes to the end zone. I mean, that's your Commanders right there. And then, of course, we don't score, but that's our team.
That and accepting penalties we don't need to accept, and then watching the opponents throw a long touchdown pass on the very next play. So
how many false starts did we have in that game? Was it like 5, 6?
I lost count.
Oh yeah, that was really disappointing. I mean, among other things.
It started early, and what I took out of that is that the offensive line has the same thing going through their head that Sam Howell has going through his.
You got to get out early.
Any sacks, can't give up any sacks. Got to get on this guy early, and when you start thinking that way, it's not going to happen.
Agreed.
Well,
so what is going to happen Sunday?
So I think I said this earlier, but now I'll add some mustard. If you think it was bad on Sunday with what the defense does, I can flat guarantee you that the Eagles are going to be just have an 8-9 in the box and come from every direction. And God help us if we get down 10 or 14 early in that game, because they will be coming and coming and coming. John, you're right. Or one of you guys said we would, I think it was Bob, that yeah, it wouldn't surprise, right, if the team now comes out and actually plays a really strong game and looks like they're into it. They'll probably make a game of it because it's what we do, and it's the NFC East, and we only get blown out by the Bears and Bills. And this team does not start with a B, so clearly we're not going to get blown out by them.
They have to have more than one win.
And I don't think we're going to beat the Eagles. I don't think there's any way we're going to beat the Eagles. I think FedEx Field's going to be a sea of green. And we're going to have to keep reminding ourselves why this season is we're waiting and we're clearing the decks for next year. I hope that we come up with a win. It'd be great. I hope Sam has a good game and doesn't get killed back there. And I will admit this among friends here. I plan to be on the golf course during the game, and I will watch it afterwards.
So the only X factor in the whole thing for me is that Philly's coming off the biggest win of the season against the team a lot of people thought would go into Philadelphia and beat them in the Dolphins. They thumped the Dolphins, and the game after us for Philadelphia is a home game against Dallas. So I think there's a little bit of the kind of the, just like we went up to New York and thought we'd just show up apparently and win because we're a better team. I think there's a possibility for a big letdown on their part, but I don't expect it. I have us going down 38-10. I just don't see us. I don't see the coaches being able to come up with any kind of a plan. I know they did a good job last time, but that seems like a long time ago to me. And Mark, you brought it up earlier that there doesn't have to be a whole lot of game planning if you're the DC of a team coming to play Washington. You just send the house. That's the game plan. And I'm afraid I don't think we can stop them if they decide to send the house.
They have some horses on that defense, man. They're going to be coming.
All right, I'll just say I do not expect to win this football game. I also do not expect to get blown out. I am not sure that Philly brings the house. I expected them to bring the house 3 weeks ago, and they didn't do it. Very rarely did they blitz 3 weeks ago. And that vaunted defensive line of theirs didn't impress me any more than our defensive line is impressing me, if you really want to know the truth. I've been back and watched the Philly game again. They didn't exactly manhandle our offensive line. And yet that's fully what I expected. Our guys got kicked in the nuts this week. Their guys did the kicking to somebody else this week. Kind of messes with your mindset a little bit. There are a couple of ways Philadelphia could come into this game full of confidence, knowing they are the better team, knowing they are going to put us away, and fully prepared to do everything. They could also come into this game going, we beat the Dolphins. This is not the Dolphins. We don't have to do much. And find themselves in a dogfight in a big hurry like they did 3 weeks ago. The problem is it was just 3 weeks ago, and they didn't expect to be in a dogfight then, and I firmly believe they will remember that.
Yeah.
I don't, like I said, I don't expect to get blown out. I think it's a respectable football game. I think it's the type of game that we all hoped we would see this team play, a very professional, workmanlike game where we lose to an obviously better team. I'm going to say 24-17.
Look, I have no faith that we're going to win this game. We have no reason to win this game. We're not the better team. We're not the hotter team. We haven't shown anything over the last 3 weeks to lead you to believe that we can contend with Philly. We haven't shown you anything over the last 2 games to lead you to believe that our defense can stop them early enough to keep you in the game and on script, and vice on and the opposite, when the defense is able to get their legs under them and slow down the offense, our offense hasn't shown enough to do anything. So I guess if I want to make a proclamation, it's that this would be the most Redskins game to win in the year, because we're a week away from the trade deadline. And how convenient would it be if Ron Rivera found his way to a backdoor 4-4 record going into the trade deadline so he could sell it to Josh Harrison Company that we're still in it. We still got a chance, because technically we're still a half a game out of the wild card right now behind Tampa Bay. But I just can't see it. I think it's going to end up being kind of ugly early. I think the Eagles figure out what, then they go on cruise control. Final score 31-17 Philly. And it hurts me to say that.
Yeah, and Bob, I think you're 100% right. I don't think the Eagles will play us like they did last time. I think they've watched the film over the last few weeks and they've seen how discombobulated our line is, and they may see the same thing in Sam that we were talking about, that he looks like he's questioning himself a bit. I think they'd be foolish not to come after him, right? To be honest with you. The Commanders, we've seen it before over the last 2 or 3 years. The team once a year rises up and wins a game that they have no business winning. So yeah, it could absolutely happen. And if you've got $295, and you bet it, you could win 100 if you bet on the Eagles. They're at -295. So I'm just saying, I'm not going to pick my guys in this one either. I'd love to see the upset, and if they do, we'll have a whole new bunch of shit to talk about next week. But I think this one ends up being like a 30-20 game with the Eagles, and I'm not sure it's going to be that close.
Jalen Hurts is dinged up, right? A little bit. Is that right?
Questionable knee injury. The speculation is it won't affect any playing time, but yes, he was wearing a knee brace in the second half last week.
Who's his backup?
Marcus Mariota.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Marcus.
Right.
Fellas. Well, that was fun, huh?
That doesn't change.
Yeah, but there's still things I want to see if we learned anything from 3 weeks ago. Like, I want to see who's covering AJ Brown, and I want to see AJ Brown in double digits instead of triple digits this week. That would be a victory as far as I'm concerned if we can hold him under 100, because he's on fire. The dude's just been we're not the only team he's torching. But did we learn anything? That's my question, and that's what I'm going to be looking for on Sunday.
Don't put ketchup on hot dogs. That's all we've learned.
Yeah, apparently if you do that up in New England, you get your ass kicked.
Shout out to our buddy Al.
All right, Commanders fans, hang in there, man. Hang in there. Hold on.
Hold on. Yeah.
We
only have 10 games left of it.
Only 10.
Until next week.
Night, guys.